Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sunburned Albino's 4th annual roast and vote of the 10th annual Game Awards nominees, where we talk about what deserves to be there and what doesn't, while generally praising and lamenting various aspects of the gaming industry in 2023 as a whole. We're going to go in reverse order here, so we end with Game of the Year, which means we're starting with the esports categories and holding our nose until all that's done. First up is Best Esports Event, a collection of the most exciting major gaming competitions that average about as much viewership as reruns of Young Sheldon. I didn't see any of these because I was too busy watching Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Pros sweat their hearts out every week to win hundreds of dollars at all their tournaments, so I'm abstaining from voting. Next is a real crowd favorite, Best Esports Coach, where you, the viewer, get to decide which person's sagely advice was the most effective. Was it Counter-Strike coach Danny Zonic Sorensen, who consistently reminded his team not to get shot? Or was it the League of Legends legend himself, Yoon Sung Young, who famously said, "Go mid"? XTQZZZ looks like Agent 47 put on an esports disguise to get close to a target, and I can only assume a robot who took too much Tylenol PM came up with that name. I'll be abstaining from all the esports votes, so we're just here to make fun of them. Next up is Best Esports Team, where we honor the most skilled and dominant teams in gaming, backed by organizations bleeding more money than an anemic wallet. The players get to rake in the dough through tournament winnings, while using their burgeoning notoriety to become even more profitable content creators, while the orgs themselves just spend $5 million to have Snoop Dogg take a picture with them and fuck off. Half these team names were spelled by third-grade dropouts. Gaiman Gladiators? Gladiators is the harder word, and you nailed that one, so how did you fumble the bag with gaming? Then there's Fnatic, which is just a typo they let ride. Team Vitality is just making sure they don't get one shot in the Dark Souls game, but JD Gaming sounds like a YouTube channel with 13 subscribers who uploads silent gameplay of Call of Duty Zombies. No vote. Next, we have Best Esports Athlete, and to me it's very inspiring that Paco here has managed to be nominated despite only having half a head. I think whoever took this picture was trying to defeat him, but the dude's name is Hydra, so you might want to rethink your strategy. Based on an article I read, I am under the impression that Faker is like the most famous gamer of all time. Look at him mean-mugging the camera. This dude's vibe is on another level. My man is the BTS of esports, and that profile is dynamite. No vote, though. Best esports game should definitely go to PUBG Mobile. Love the idea of teams of dudes on stage furiously tapping their phones like they're mad at a TikTok and having to redo grand finals because everyone got an Amber Alert. Counter-Strike 2 must have pulled the 2 out of the loot box because that shit is purely cosmetic. Otherwise, these are all just games you're going to see forever because nobody has made a new esport since Rocket League. Valorant is just Counter-Strike for people who draw gay porn, so it doesn't count. No vote. Next up is Content Creator of the Year, which we've apparently started nominating by pulling random names out of a hat. I am not very dialed into the popular YouTube zeitgeist, so outside of the obligatory Minecrafter, I have no idea who these people are, and judging by looks, I'll probably end up misgendering half of them, so let's just move on. No vote. Finally, we get to some real categories with Most Anticipated Game, in which almost none of the actual most anticipated games are on here. No GTA 6, no Elder Scrolls 6, no Wolverine, no Kingdom Hearts 4. Granted, Elder Scrolls 6 has never been anything other than a JPG file with Elder Scrolls 6 plastered on it, and Kingdom Hearts decided to reveal another fucking mobile game instead of unveil anything since KH4's announcement a year and a half ago. I think I speak for everyone who agrees with me when I say you can take your KH phone games and shove them up your ass. Nobody wants this. As for what is on the list, the next half of Final Fantasy VII exists. The 17th Yakuza game exists, the Star Wars game they keep trying to pretend people care about exists, and Tekken 8 will be another decent fighting game to round out the trio of Mortal Kombat 1 and Street Fighter 6. Hades 2 is big hype in the indie scene, so I definitely understand that one, and that's going to get my vote. Next is Best Adaptation, which contains basically every adaptation because there aren't that many adaptations, so everyone here is getting a participation trophy for making it to production. I didn't know the Gran Turismo movie even came out, but I heard it wasn't bad, and The Last of Us is very unique for being the only show that stars a Game of Thrones character and a potato. The Super Mario Bros. Movie was decently good, great animation, and the cast actually works, but I'm just gonna come right out and say that the Peaches song isn't funny and isn't even performed that well, so I don't know why people freaked out about it for a while. I'm actually going to vote for Twisted Metal here because I am personally invested in that show bringing Twisted Metal back into the gaming lexicon so we can hopefully get a new game sometime. And I still think a Twisted Metal DC crossover would be lit as hell. Imagine the Batmobile and Twisted Metal car combat. Imagine Sweet Tooth and the Joker teaming up. I'm giving away this gold mine for free. Somebody just needs to come collect. Next up is Best Multiplayer, and the start of Baldur's Gate 3 being nominated for everything. I've played a ton of Divinity Original Sin 2, their previous game, which functions very similarly, and what basically happens is one person takes charge and starts all the quests, and the other person just follows them around like a puppy and gets bored not knowing why they're doing anything. The combat is fun, but the multiplayer only tends to be good for the person setting everything in motion. Diablo 4 is kinda like that, except with the added slog of 5 million bland-ass side quests that you do for regional renown so you can equip extra potions or whatever. Party Animals is just Gang Beasts, which came out 9 years ago, so I don't know why we're pretending this is a new game. Street Fighter 6 has great multiplayer if you're trying to fight friends or grind rankings, and Super Mario Wonder's multiplayer is very refreshing from getting thrown off cliffs in the 3D World games. It functions more like Dark Souls, where people in other instances of the level can help guide you to secrets and even drop checkpoints for you to respawn at. None of these games really scream best multiplayer to me, but I'll just vote for Street Fighter 6. Next up is Best Sports/Racing, and are we sure that the Crew Motorfest and Forza Motorsport aren't the same game? I don't know how good Hot Wheels 2 is, but I would have unironically put Disney Speedstorm here. That game was actually fun, and the grind was engaging until I got poached by Honkai Star Rail. If you play more than one gacha game, you better be a CEO of something. There's no way I'm putting on a balancing act between two money pits. Granted, I never felt the need to spend money on Speedstorm, and I'm as free to play as humanly possible on Star Rail, but 2 daily grinds is too many. I will never be into realistic sports games, so unless EA Sports FC 24 has a secret roster of Mario characters, I will not be checking it out. And then F1 is just NASCAR for people who think they're better than NASCAR. No vote. Next is Best Sim/Strategy, a category that Baldur's Gate 3 somehow does not fall into because Nintendo bought out all the slots on this one. This would have been a great opportunity to remind people that Marvel's Midnight Suns exists and was amazing by putting it here since it missed last year's cutoff date, and it's good enough to beat all of these, but everyone just forgot because it came out in December. A cruel twist of fate. Fire Emblem Engage would be an enthusiastic vote for me if it just had New Game Plus like the last Fire Emblem did. There's absolutely no excuse for it not being there when all of the mechanics feel designed specifically for it, so it's going to get my begrudging vote instead. Next up is Best Family, but I don't see the D'Amelios on here. I don't think Disney Illusion Island should be nominated for Best Family Game since it's made exclusively for babies and people who allegedly commit charity fraud. Party Animals is great if your family wasn't alive when Gang Beasts came out. Pikmin 4 is a fun time for people who only have Switches. Sonic Superstars is good if you're stuck living in the past, and Super Mario Wonder probably has to take this one. This game is basically perfect. Like, for what it is, Wonder has managed to get about as close to perfection as any game this year. That said, I'm not terribly into it, but even I can recognize when something is doing everything right, even if it's a genre I've fallen off of since I was a kid. Next is Best Fighting, in which I've never heard of God of Rock or Pocket Bravery, but everyone knows the big competition is going to be between Mortal Kombat 1 and Street Fighter 6 anyway. Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2 is supposedly a better version of the first game, which was nominated 2 years ago because there's just never enough good fighting games to fill these slots, but I'm not buying that shit for $50 again. So MK1 or SF6? Let's do some pros and cons. Mortal Kombat 1 pros: great story, top-tier production value, high-quality roster of mostly fun-to-play characters. Cons: Megan Fox. Street Fighter 6 pros: huge open-world story with custom characters, accessible button inputs for new players, and an extensive training mode, and no Megan Fox. Cons: I'm bad at it. I'm more of a Mortal Kombat guy in general, but I think Street Fighter 6 does more, so I'm voting that. Next is Best RPG, and there are a lot of heavy hitters out here, and Starfield. I'll give you this though, Final Fantasy XVI is objectively worse of an RPG than Starfield by a wide margin. All you do is level up the same stats by the same amount every time and then reinforce your weapon twice before you trade up for the next one and repeat that 8 times. Final Fantasy XVI is barely an RPG. It's got the best combat of any Final Fantasy I've played, and the Game of Thronesian story is cool to get into, but boy did they tack on those RPG elements at the last second. Even God of War does better. Starfield is like the One Piece of video games. Everyone who loves it is like, wait bro, just give it 100 more episodes. I promise it gets good. And that very well may be true, but I gave Starfield 9 hours, and in that time it was an empty stroll through a series of barren wastelands that was like the opposite of Skyrim in terms of how you're supposed to play it. In Skyrim, you give the main quest the finger and go gallivanting around on your own for 100 hours and have a blast. In Starfield, if you don't adhere directly to the main path, you're just gonna go wander off into outer space and find nothing. Mods have always made Bethesda games better, but this is the first time we'll need mods to make a Bethesda game fun. If you want to play an absolute banger RPG, though, might I suggest Sea of Stars, which is what I couldn't put down during Starfield's early access period to the point where I was like, why did I even pre order that? Let me get a refund and just play it on Game Pass, which is also where I played Sea of Stars. You guys need to take advantage of Game Pass while it's here, because that shit is going to collapse any day now. They're straight up lying about it being profitable, and devs don't love releasing their games for free, but while they're still doing it, we gamers get to eat. 3 of the games on this list were on Game Pass and still are because Lies of P is too, so if that doesn't convince you to pay $10 a month to save 50 each on banger after banger, you should have someone else in charge of your finances. Sea of Stars is on the shortlist for Best Indie Game of 2023, and Lies of P is the only game on my list of Best Souls-like Game ever. There is such incredible quality on display here, and the sad part is Baldur's Gate 3 is still gonna sweep, but I'll do my tiny non-difference making part and vote for Lies of P here. Best Action Adventure is next and as stacked as ever. This is gaming's category. If there was a single genre to represent the industry as a whole, it's always this one. This is where devs extend their budgets to infinity and try to make the most impressive possible game. I'm happy to see Jedi Survivor get a nomination. I think this game is underrated because it launched with some performance issues, but it's a super good game. I like Alan Wake 2, but I don't know if Best Action Adventure Game is the right fit for it. Most of the action is just holding your flashlight on shadows and waiting way too long for them to either disappear or attack you. Spider-Man 2 is a banger, and Resident Evil 4 is a banger, whereas Tears of the Kingdom is a banger in the sense that you can build wooden statues with exploding cocks. I get the argument sometimes that people fault Tears of the Kingdom for just being a retread of the same map, but nobody faults Spider-Man 2 for reusing New York, and that's true on a literal level. But Spider-Man 2 also has movement that is miles better, and you can fast travel instantly to any point on the map right down to the intersection, instantly, once you do enough missions in a borough. It's the best fast travel in the history of games. It's precise, it takes approximately 0 seconds, and you start off swinging so you have instant momentum too. If you have a PhD in mechanical engineering, you can create some fast vehicles in Tears of the Kingdom, but mostly what makes the map feel more samey is the fact that it's that humongous and still the same. And that you spend more time traveling within it because you run at the speed of molasses and have the stamina of a coma patient. Spider-Man players don't have time to get sick of a map because they can be anywhere they want in it at any time, and web swinging is a million times more fun than building a wind-powered carriage. For me, it's between Spider-Man 2 and Resident Evil 4, but I'm gonna go Spider-Man 2. Next up is Best Action Game, which is action without the adventure, and Bilbo's least favorite category. Dead Island 2 is here, which is interesting given how bad it is. They started that game in like 2010 and said 13 years of innovation can suck my nuts. Zombies with hyper armor who don't stagger when you clobber their jaws open and hit you with invisible attacks are not fun to deal with. I like the idea of Ghost Runner 2, but I haven't tried it yet. My fear with Remnant 2 is that it was being carried by the genre like the first game was, where people saying it was amazing simply meant that it didn't suck. Third-person multiplayer shooter Souls-like as a description is a lot of free goodwill towards a player base who are diehard fans of anything Soulsy. Hi-Fi Rush owes half its popularity to how much people disliked Forspoken, a game I forgot even came out this year, which sounds weird because they're nothing alike, but the discourse was basically heavily marketed AAA game with annoying protagonist and terrible dialogue versus surprise release free on Game Pass cartoony action rhythm game that feels refreshing in a market oversaturated with tired open worlds and hefty price tags. As a result, this has caused people to vastly overestimate Hi-Fi Rush's pedigree. Like, I've seen a bunch of people say it should be Game of the Year, or at least nominated, and I think that's just the Stray effect in action again. A new law of games is that every year there has to be one indie or less mainstream title that people overrate through the roof for no reason. Last year it was Stray, the year before it was It Takes Two, and this year it's Hi-Fi Rush. To be clear, I played Hi-Fi Rush for a few hours, and it's definitely good, just don't get too crazy with it. Then we have Armored Core 6, which is a game I knew I wouldn't like because I'm not a mech combat person, and I think a lot of From Software fans deluded themselves into thinking they were going to love this like any other Souls game, which is just not how it works. Some of them did turn out to be undiscovered Armored Core fans, in which case good for them for figuring that out about themselves, but I know I ain't that. I knew this category was missing something and I couldn't put my finger on it, but I just remembered, where the hell is Wolong Fallen Dynasty? That game is at least as good as the first Neo and by the same people. I would have voted for that if it were here, but from what we've got, I'm going to vote Hi-Fi Rush. Next up is Best VR/AR, which is still technology I have not bought into, so we are skipping. Following that, we've got Best Mobile Game, and I've simply got to know why Hello Kitty Island Adventure, a game South Park made up as a meme back in 2006, is now a real game and apparently a good one? The simulation we live in is complex. Honkai Star Rail is going to clean house, though, just like Genshin before it. It might not be as culturally impactful or have as many top-tier waifus, but it is a much better game. The gacha aspect is still irredeemably scummy and cheap. You could quintuple the Jade rewards from daily and weekly content and still not have near enough to avoid shelling out for a character. Combined with the fact that standard passes for the standard 5-star banner just don't fucking exist anymore when you complete all the story content, you get one pass a week from Simulated Universe, and that's literally it. And you're left with a game that heavily capitalizes on FOMO to rake in the billions while somehow still being too cheap to give any consistently meaningful rewards. I watched a guy fully enhance a 5-star character by pulling her the required 7 times, while pulling her signature weapon the required 6 times to fully enhance that too, and it cost him $2,000. I'm just like, dude, first of all, seek help. Second of all, why does it cost $2,000 to max out a character? Why is society okay with that? In a world where giant game expansions are $30, why does a gacha game get to put a spending ceiling of $2,000 or more on fully optimizing a single character? For $2,000, I had to have every character in the next 5 years E6'd and S5'd immediately on release with my name tattooed on their forehead. For $2,000, I should be on the next banner. Sunburned Albino, the 5-star ice nihility character who freezes and debuffs the hell out of everybody. I wish Honkai Star Rail wasn't so good so I wouldn't have to vote for it, but I still do. Now for Best Debut Indie Game, the category that often requires the most Googling because nobody ever really knows what games are a studio's first game. As such, I have no idea what snubs have occurred, though I'm sure there were plenty. The 3 games I've played here are Dredge, Venba, and Viewfinder. Dredge is a cool atmospheric fishing game that has a unique fishing minigame that I really enjoy the simplicity and non-annoyingness of, but after a few hours you get the gist of the game and there's no real drive to finish it. Venba is a 2-hour visual novel about a family of Tamil Indians, which are a very anciently rooted and rare subculture in India. But if you see one in the wild with a purple or orange glow, out of respect, please do not try to loot them. They moved to Canada, and it's a story that weaves cooking minigames with the parents complaining about their son being a pocho and rejecting his culture. It was cool to see some of the food, but the story doesn't go anywhere that interesting and literally just skips over its most potentially heartfelt moment. It's on Game Pass, though, if you want to check it out, because even $15 is too much for that little content. Viewfinder is what the puzzle lords now refer to as a liminal puzzle game, which means it uses perspective to mess with spatial distortion and physics. It's a gimmick that no longer impresses me. It's like if you watch a magician do 10 card tricks in a row, you're like, alright, that's my card again, good job, but I'm bored. And then I still don't know if Pizza Tower is just a meme or if it's actually good beyond 10-year-olds raving about it. It's definitely made the biggest splash culturally, so it might deserve to win by default, but I'm going to vote Dredge because I actually played it. Now for always my favorite category, Best Independent Game, so I can lament all of the many snubs that occur every year. 3 of these games are just the debut indies again. Did you ever even log into Steam this year if you were struggling that hard for choices? Here's a quick speedrun list of indies that would be better than at least one of these nominations. Bone Razor Minions, Contraband Police, Cassette Beasts, Ember Knights, which went 1.0 this year, Blasphemous 2, Headbangers Rhythm Royale, Gunbrella, Lil Gator Game, and Only Up. That's kind of a joke, but it was still really fun. That is a staggering amount of snubs in one category. It doesn't matter too much, though, because all of those would have still lost to Dave the Diver and Sea of Stars, the absolute crowned royalty, the king and queen of the indie scene in 2023. Sea of Stars takes the best of its inspirations like Super Mario RPG and creates an absurdly long quest packed with meaningful side stuff and completionist criteria that also benefits you to seek out. Dave the Diver is just the most charming game of 2023, hands down, with a satisfying loop of diving into ever-changing waters to gather ingredients for your sushi restaurant that you also manage. Tons of progression upgrades to both facets of the game make it impossible to put down, and the characters and short little cutscenes just put a smile on your face every time. I personally think Sea of Stars will win this category, but I think Dave the Diver is better and deserves it more, so I'm voting Dave the Diver. Next is Best Community Support, and in a very fun joke from the Game Awards, I can see that Destiny 2 is nominated. Baldur's Gate 3 community support is barely worth talking about. The game was in early access for 2 years. If they weren't community supporting, they weren't doing their job. If they did a humongous litany of meaningful updates post 1.0, that would be one thing, but my chat was saying that all the big stuff was pre-launch. How about Cyberpunk righting the ship, huh? It may have taken 3 years, but we finally have something the general public can be not sorry they bought. This was my game of the year in 2020, bugs and all, as a PS5 user, because try as they might, they couldn't stop me from loving the game even back then, but now I can wholeheartedly recommend it without getting scoffed at. I'll vote Cyberpunk. Next is Best Ongoing, which is a slightly different beast. While community support is like bug fixing and responding to community feedback with patch notes, Ongoing is all about the new content that gets rolled out. DLCs, expansions, free updates at events, that sort of thing. As far as I can tell, the only game here that does things that bring everyone back to it on a semi-regular basis is Fortnite, whether it was the introduction of Zero Build, or recently the OG season that brought all the early adopters like myself back from the dead to log in and be completely shell-shocked by the new UI. This shit is like Roblox now. I've never seen a menu screen that just straight up lobotomized me on reaction like current Fortnite. I think the last time I logged in, I officially became a boomer. I'll vote Fortnite anyway. Next up is Games for Impact, and I'm shocked that I actually played 3 of them this time. We already talked about Venba and its thought-provoking and pro-social message of don't assimilate. I also played Tachia, and I appreciated that quite literally every gameplay section had an option where you could just skip it, be it a minigame, puzzle, or the entire game. I beat it in 30 seconds, very efficient. Then there's Goodbye Volcano High. Oh man. This is an angsty high school dinosaur game about teenage dinosaur angst, where everyone walks around feeling their feelings all over the place and gender is merely a suggestion. I actually highly recommend this game if you have friends to show it to, because every character is perfectly cringe and it's very fun to make fun of. But I'm not gonna vote for it because it winning anything would be fucking outlandish. I haven't played the other games, and this category as a whole is usually lame, so I'm abstaining, but let me know if you played the ones I didn't play and liked them. Next is Innovation in Accessibility, which we're gonna skip because I'm not disabled, at least physically. Now we're at Best Performance, and there's a lot to like here, and one thing that makes no sense. Before that, though, please, the Game Awards, please, for the love of all that is holy, put the fucking character names next to the people names. There's 100 characters in Baldur's Gate 3. If I'm not scouring the credits, how am I supposed to know which one Neil Newbon is responsible for? Yes, I could Google it, but is it really fair for the nominees if some of them are lesser known or less obvious and require more research to justify a vote? Lots of people aren't going to do that, and they shouldn't have to. People look at Ben Starr for Final Fantasy and they're like, that's Clive, right? We shouldn't have to guess. But the one thing that makes no sense to me is that of all the people you could have chosen from Alan Wake 2, why did it have to be the most wooden character of them all? Saga gives us basically nothing until the end, and even then it's not much. You know who is far and away the best acted character in the game, though, and who should have won this category by a landslide if nominated? It's not who you think. It's Alice Wake. Alan Wake's missing wife is on screen for like 5 minutes over the course of the whole game during these half dozen or so video diaries we watch as Alan, and in that time she manages to steal the entire show. The way she communicates pain, reluctance, and resolve in those short minute-long recordings is masterful. I wasn't paying that much attention at first, but she drew me in quick. If you're not going to nominate her for a Game Award, someone at the Academy needs to deliver her an Oscar. But since we don't live in a just world, I'll vote for Ben Starr because Clive's screams are legendary. Next up is Best Audio Design, and I don't pay too much mind to this kind of thing in games, but Hi-Fi Rush got a cheat code for this category, the way everything that happens in the world perfectly syncs up to the beat. It's like their whole gimmick, so if they don't win Best Audio Design, that's kind of sad. I heard Dead Space had good stuff too, though. I'll vote Hi-Fi Rush. Next is Best Score and Music. As I mention whenever is necessary, I am a musician, but generally I'm not too invested in which games have killer soundtracks because I don't listen to music in general. I'm just here to play the game. If the music is good, that's nice, but it's not very important to me. Final Fantasy always gets lauded for this kind of thing, but I only remember one of 16's themes, though it is a pretty good one. It's the one that's like, na 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 na. You know that one? I don't think anyone on the nomination panel actually listened to the collectible records in Lies of P, or else that would be here in spades. Alan Wake 2 is interesting because while the old gods of Asgard can rock your fucking socks off, nothing else in-game really screams best score. After every chapter, they give you a skippable intermission of a random other kind of song, but I did what most people probably did and skipped all those because I'm trying to get back to the engrossing narrative and I don't have to pee. When I did catch the first 30 seconds of one, though, it was nice. I don't remember Hi-Fi Rush having that good of music, but I could be wrong, and Tears of the Kingdom is mostly dead silence with the occasional ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. I'll actually go ahead and vote Alan Wake on this because those guitar solos are killer. Next is Best Art Direction, and everything here has a good claim to make. Alan Wake 2 deserves it for its seamless blend of live action and gameplay, when in every other game I've ever seen, the live action has always been out of place and weird. Hi-Fi Rush deserves it for that comic book cartoony animation you don't see too often anymore. Lies of P deserves it because everything about this game is drop-dead gorgeous and reeks of gothic Victorian style. Super Mario Bros. Wonder deserves it because of how bright and colorful the palette feels and all the cool visual stuff the Wonder Seeds are doing. Oh, and Tears of the Kingdom is here because it's the same as Breath of the Wild. It's interesting that of all the pictures here, Zelda is the only one drawn in an art style that doesn't represent what it looks like in the actual game. I'm voting Lies of P. Next up is Best Narrative, and we're just going to go ahead and vote Alan Wake 2 without too much pondering. There we go, okie dokie. Next is Best Game Direction, and it was while browsing this category that I came up with another idea for a category that seems very pertinent. Best Game Mechanic. Because when you look at these titles and why they might deserve Best Game Direction, a lot of it has to do with new or mastered mechanics. Zelda is here in part because Ultra Hand is a game changer. Ultra Hand should be nominated for Best Game Mechanic. Super Mario Wonder is here in part because of Wonder Seeds. The Wonder Seeds should be nominated for Best Game Mechanic. Spider-Man 2's immense fast travel optimization should be nominated for Best Game Mechanic. And Lies of P's unique mixing and matching of blades and handles to craft different stats and movesets should be nominated for Best Game Mechanic. Lies of P is not even on here, though, which is sad, considering it took established formulas and remixed the hell out of them to create enhanced ideas as well as things that are completely unique to it as a game. When I think about what instance of game direction is the most widely beneficial to the gaming audience, though, I think of an interview I read with one of the people who did Super Mario Wonder, where they said that every individual level was designed to have at least one thing in it to completely surprise players. People have been playing Mario games for 30 years, and Wonder still took up the challenge to give them tons of things they weren't expecting or hadn't seen before. That's a philosophy a lot of games could benefit from. I'm voting Super Mario Wonder. And this is it, ladies and gentlemen, and high school dinosaurs. Game of the Year 2023. I predicted the Game Awards would nominate all of these games except Wonder, because I thought they'd like FF16 too much not to put it in instead, but 5 out of 6 is still pretty good. We've got Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Spider-Man 2, Resident Evil 4, Super Mario Wonder, and Tears of the Kingdom. All of these games are sequels or established IPs. Boo! Just kidding, who cares as long as they're bangers. Would my top 6 list look different than this one? Yes. But you won't find out how much different until I release my top 20 games of 2023 at the end of December, because unlike the Game Awards, I don't have a November cutoff date. Granted, it doesn't look like much else is coming out this year unless they do more announcements, but I digress. So what do we do here? Do we sit here and pretend that any game other than Baldur's Gate 3 has a shot? Do we vote our conscience anyway, even knowing it's futile? Do we lament the fact that our personal game of the year isn't even on here? Full disclosure, the only game in this list I haven't played extensively is in fact Baldur's Gate 3. I did like 4 hours and fell off into the surge of newly released games and never got back to it, though I still plan to. As a humongous fan of Divinity Original Sin 2, Larian's last project, which is functionally almost identical, I was surprised that Baldur's Gate 3 didn't immediately click, and I felt like I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. But there's time yet to figure it out. So, if we take BG3 out of the running due to lack of experience, let's rank order the remaining 5 games to figure out Game of the Year. Number 5, Tears of the Kingdom. Sorry, as someone who mildly enjoyed Breath of the Wild, but really only finished it because I was streaming it, Tears of the Kingdom is way too much of the same thing despite all the extra toys you can play with now. Number 4, Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Actually perfect for what it sets out to do. This should no doubt go down in history as one of, if not the best, 2D Mario game, but for me, perfection in that kind of niche has a lower ceiling than other kinds of games that entertain you for longer or are more tailored to your gaming tastes. Number 3, Alan Wake 2. Alan Wake 2 is just Resident Evil 4 with a better story, but slightly worse everything else. The tension is great, but the X-ray jump scares are cheap and repetitive as all hell. Lovely exploration, though. Number 2, Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 is just Alan Wake 2 with a worse story but slightly better everything else. The gameplay is top-notch and it's a formula I can always get behind, but I wish it was easier to unlock crazy shit like infinite ammo for New Game Plus runs like in Village. Number 1, Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 is exactly what a good sequel should be. Better everything across the board. I'm not saying it's my personal game of the year, but of these choices, it's what I'm voting for. But that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Watch all my other videos if you don't want deep vein thrombosis, and I'll see you guys next time.